In this lesson, we'll continue to build upon the table we started in the previous session. Now we're going to explore how we can build out multiple rows and columns and structure those columns so that they lay out in a fashion of our choosing. Reviewing this structure, when we work with tables, we're working with rows and with columns. Rows are defined using the TR element, which stands for table row. Our columns are defined by tabular data, essentially cells repeated in a single row. So we use the TD tag for our tabular data. And in this example, you can see I have an instance of a TD element nested within a TR element, both of which are nested within our table element. Now, in this table, which has a single row, I'm going to create multiple columns. And I'm going to do that by positioning my mouse after our first TD element and hitting the return button, tabbing over a couple of times, and typing out 4 more TD elements. I'm doing this because I wish to have 4 columns in this row, and each column needs an element to define the contents of that column for a given row. Now, to see what this would look like, I'm going to enter a little bit of data into each of these cells that will make up my columns, and I'll enter some very simple text such as 1, 2, 3, and 4 into each of these table cells. I'll then save my file using the File menu and selecting Save, Command-S, Control-S on the PC, and then I'll fire off my web browser, here in this case Firefox on the Mac, and from the File menu, Open, and find tables.htm in the Chapter 7 folder. Click on Open, and now I'll size down the size of my browser window and position it next to my HTML document so I can see the two side by side. And I can see that each of these TD elements creates a table cell, which defines essentially 4 columns in a single row, that row being defined by our TR tags. Now, when we look at this table, we can see each of these columns is of uniform width, but we don't have to accept that. We can specify a unique width for each of these table cells. From the previous example, we could see that our table has a width specified by percentage. So we will want to use a percentage to define the width of each of these table cells, such that when we add up all of the percentage widths of our table cells that make up this row, that total would equal 100%. So, I'll position my mouse within the first cell of our table row, hit the space bar, and type the attribute width equals quote quote, and I might arbitrarily decide that I want the first table cell, which contains the word 1, to be 10% of the available width. So I'll key in 10%, and I'm going to do the same for the second table cell, but this time I'm going to specify a width of 40%. And I'm going to do the same thing on the next table cell and specify a width of 40%. And since I've taken up a total of 40 plus 40 plus 10, or 90% of the available space, yes, there is a little bit of math in HTML, sorry, that leaves me with 10% available width, as defined by my opening table tag. So now, if I save this file and switch over to my web browser and hit reload or refresh, I can see that the table cell widths adjust. And if I increase the size of this browser window, you can see that those widths are recalculated based on the size of the browser window after editing our HTML file. Now we'll take a look at a few other attributes that we can assign to our table cells. I'm going to come back and revisit the first table cell. You have the option to specify both horizontal and vertical alignment of content within a table cell. In this example, I decide as the designer that I want all of the contents of my table cells to be left justified horizontally and top justified vertically. Why I want this will become apparent in future lessons, but for right now, I'm going to come back to my first TD tag and specify the attribute align. And the value that I'll give to the align attribute is left, so that the contents of this cell are horizontally left justified. I'm also going to specify a vertical alignment, and the attribute we'll use will be v_align equals, quote, quote, and within the quotes, top. Now I want these attributes to be on all of my table cells, so I'm going to select by clicking and dragging with my mouse across these two attributes, and from the Edit menu I'm going to copy, and I'm going to paste these two attributes after each of the with attributes for my table cells in this table. So from the Edit menu I'll paste, or Command V, Control V on the PC, and I'll Command V on the third one, and again on the fourth one. And now I'll save my file and reload, and you don't see any change yet because each of these table cells don't have data that would push the height of the cell downward. If I were to type within the TD tag, you don't need to do this, I'm just going to do this by way of example, type some text such as put a whole lot of text in the first table cell, and save and switch over to my browser and hit reload, you can see that the table cell's height is pushed down. Had we not specified a vertical align of top, the words 2, 3, and 4 would be located vertically in the center of these table cells. If we were creating something like a table of contents, this might look a little strange. So we put in that vertical align attribute so that the contents would stay justified against the top of the table cell. Now I don't actually want this text which I typed in for this quick example, so I'll select it and delete it so that my page looks like yours, and save my work using the File menu and selecting Save. Now we've formatted a row, and that row containing 4 columns, each column presenting us with a table cell of data. But let's say I want to have 8 rows in my table, and I want each row formatted exactly the same way as this row. Well, like you, there is no way that I am going to type all of this out 8 times. So, using my mouse, I'll click immediately after the closing TR tag, hold down my mouse button, click and drag so that the entire TR element is highlighted in blue, and then from the Edit menu, I will copy that HTML, position my mouse again after the closing TR tag, hit the return key a few times, and then from the Edit menu, paste. Now I am going to take out the 1, 2, 3, and 4 words contained within each of these table cells inside this table row. And to see what this looks like, to make sure that it's working, we'll save our work under the File menu, switch over to our browser and reload, and we can see we have a first row which contains the words 1, 2, 3, and 4, and a second row which contains no data, but we can see the table cells are present. I took out the words 1, 2, 3, and 4 because I want to have 6 more rows, but I don't want those words in every row. So I cleaned up, essentially, a duplicate copy of our first row by removing those words so that we could come back in and, as we did a moment ago, click and drag to make a selection of HTML code, that being these table cells with no content within them, so that we can copy them into memory. Hit the return key after our closing TR tag and paste, and then hit the return key and paste again, and hit the return key and again, and again, and again, until we have a total of 8 rows. Right now I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'll paste 2 more rows. And save my work. And switch over to my browser and hit reload or refresh. And now I can see that I have multiple rows. And I know that my table is working the way that I intended.